Are you a student wondering if you have test anxiety, or is it something else, such as ADHD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder, or possibly a learning disability, such as deficits in executive functioning? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the differences and maybe help clarify for you if you think that you have test anxiety, and then what you can do about it. So my name is Suzanne Sweezy. I'm a licensed educational psychologist with SoCal Educational Evaluations in Southern California. And I'm also the author of the Test Anxiety Tactics workbook. So this workbook I made into a course where I go through the workbook with students, and that's one of the solutions that I'm going to be presenting at the end. And I'm going to share with you how, when I'm evaluating students, I know if it's test anxiety or possibly ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, or possibly a learning disability. Let's go over some of the symptoms of test anxiety first. Okay, so if you're experiencing test anxiety, you're going to maybe feel sweaty, lose your train of thought, have poor concentration during tests, okay? Other symptoms may include like stomach pains. I've had students that I've evaluated share with me that they have to reread questions over and over again. They get really tripped up and caught in their mental distractions. Maybe they're perseverating on, question number 2, and they're trying to get through question 10, and they're still like ruminating and thinking about that previous question, and it's preventing them from getting through their exam. Okay, and test anxiety, it really happens most frequently with those timed exams. So maybe you have the SAT or ACT coming up. Most of the students that I'm evaluating are actually studying for their LSAT. So they want to become attorneys, they want to go to law school, get into that prestigious school, and they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and that's creating test anxiety. Some of the differences between test anxiety and possibly ADHD might be that ADHD is going to occur in any situation, right? So whether you're folding laundry or making dinner, you're losing your attention, you're losing your train of thought, you're easily distracted, possibly you interrupt conversations frequently, okay? So people with test anxiety, they're not going to have necessarily those behaviors unless they have them comorbid, which means like they have ADHD and they're also getting test anxiety. Sometimes ADHD symptoms cause test anxiety. Students with ADHD may develop test anxiety because they know they're going to lose their train of thought, get easily distracted by, those mental distractions. Other symptoms of ADHD may include difficulty retaining the information when they're studying and poor time management when they're studying, procrastination. So procrastination is a tricky one though, because it also does occur with test anxiety. So it's that avoidance behavior because there's so much anxiousness, right? So much like tension and stress and just feeling overwhelmed, maybe even experiencing panic attacks, that when you don't like those feelings, students with test anxiety tend to avoid studying. So that procrastination with studying may actually be a test anxiety symptom as opposed to an ADHD symptom, or it could be part of both. Other ADHD symptoms may be rushing through test items. So students with ADHD may rush through the test items. They're trying to get it over with, or they just can't calm their minds to concentrate on questions and answer thoroughly, even though they might have all of the information. Okay, so with test anxiety, you might have studied, all the information, and then you blank out when it comes to the test. And then some of the differences with test anxiety versus generalized anxiety disorder may include that when you have generalized anxiety disorder, it's impacting other areas of your life, not just testing, right? That's why it's called test anxiety. Maybe you have social phobia. Maybe you have difficulty going out and socializing with others, going to parties, going to social gatherings, even going out to like a restaurant, or you feel anxious in your class when you're surrounded by all of those students. That might be more generalized anxiety. Or you're just feeling always tense and it's affecting your sleep. So test anxiety can impact your sleep, if you have that test coming up. But if you have generalized anxiety, you might be losing sleep and maybe waking up early at 3 a.m. in the morning, or difficulty going to sleep, feeling restless, and not wanting to go to sleep because you just can't stay asleep. That might be a symptom of generalized anxiety disorder, especially if you don't have a test coming up. To summarize, generalized anxiety is going to be more not situational to a test. And ADHD is going to be a lot of those test anxiety symptoms around tests and around studying and schoolwork, but also other areas of your life. And also, ADHD usually presents itself pretty early in childhood. So when somebody's going to diagnose a student with ADHD, we're gonna look back at the history. Were you inattentive? Back in elementary school, were your teachers always telling you to sit down? Were you getting in a little bit of trouble? Were you rushing through your schoolwork? Things like that establish a history, because ADHD is typically developed in early childhood, whereas test anxiety may be developed later in life as those pressures and stress, stressful feelings occur as the pressure to find a career, get into a good college, get into a good graduate program, start happening, right? That all that pressure, whether it's coming from your parents or financial stresses that are putting that pressure on you, or pressure that you're putting on yourself just to make things happen, to get that dream career. It's a lot of stress. So it may create test-specific test anxiety. And finally, people with learning disabilities, that's also going to be like ADHD, where it develops earlier in childhood. Whereas you had difficulty learning to read, learning math concepts, retaining information, maybe you had an IEP or 504 plan, if those sound familiar to you, related to a learning disability. Okay, and now on to what can you do about it. So some of your options include therapy. Okay, going to a therapist, a counselor, whether it's Zoom or in person. A lot of colleges offer free counseling. So, maybe there's a list, but if you get on that list, by the time you get to finals, maybe you can see that person and learn some strategies for coping with your test anxiety. Or if you get evaluated fully by a psychologist and they say, you know what, it's actually generalized anxiety or it's ADHD with test anxiety, having a professional licensed mental health therapist help you specifically target your symptoms and teach you skills for managing your anxiety during exams is going to help you. Another option that's totally free is just going on YouTube like you have right now and searching up how to decrease my test anxiety, right? Learn some skills, learn some breathing strategies, things like that. I've also created a workbook and a course that I was inspired by all the students that I have been evaluating for getting accommodations for that LSAT exam and the bar exam. And these students, they want to become attorneys, and when they go to study for that LSAT, or they've taken it one time and they completely panicked, shut down, they were experiencing test anxiety. So part of my evaluation was evaluating them for anxiety and test anxiety specifically, so that way they could get accommodations for the LSAT. And I had so many students those first 2 or 3 months that had test anxiety. I thought I was going to be evaluating students for ADHD, and they were all coming to me with test anxiety. So I decided to create this workbook to help them as a tool, because many of them, even though they were students in college or they had health insurance, they really didn't want to go to a therapist, either from the stigma or the cost or the time. So I created a workbook for them, and then I've just recorded myself going through the workbook for a little course that I sell on my website, and the link is below. And it's just me going through the workbook. If you think that getting the workbook might just help you without the course, it's available on Amazon. I'll leave the link below. But if you think that having, maybe a 3-hour course on learning test anxiety strategies, study strategies, coping skills, and all the different things that I do when I help students with test anxiety or other kinds of anxiety learn to decrease symptoms of anxiety so that way they can be more successful on their tests, in their classes, have better relationships. Again, my name is Suzanne Sweezy. If you'd like to learn more about the Test Anxiety Tactics workbook or course, just click on the links below. I'll have them for you. And have a great day, students.
This video is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health or medical advice. Use of this video does not establish a therapeutic relationship. Please seek support from a licensed provider if you are experiencing significant emotional or psychological distress.